Hey, this is Dr. Jack, and it's nice. It's fun to be back with you again, and I am trying to get used to doing this series of podcasts, but I assume we're all still in lockdown. As you know, if you listen to the last podcast, I'm in the target group, and 76 years old, and with MS and diabetes and various other things. And so being inside has really enabled me to think about a lot of things and really to begin to practice what I preach when I deal with corporate people and athletes and just people in general about their lives. And it's given me a chance to sit and reflect and decide, what I want to continue doing and what I want to change and what the next chapter may look like. And it's interesting. I had a personal example happen to me the other day. I was getting ready to move into a different place. And I couldn't decide if I wanted to or not, and it was all emotional, and I wanted to do it, and I didn't want to do it, and it was a better deal if I did it, but I finally got so frustrated and so emotional about it that I decided to sit down and do what I suggest that all my clients do. I listed the pros and cons of the move, and I listed the things that were driving me nuts about the move, and the amount of pressure that each thing was causing in my psyche, and then I prioritized that list, and I found out that as I've always said, common sense prevailed. When we try to get too complicated and involved with psychobabble BS about creative problem solving and all those things, I've always felt that if we could just spend time with common sense, that we could deal with most issues. And so that's what I did, and recognized that the three things that were really wearing the hardest on my mind were things that I could eliminate. And so I crossed those three off and decided to stay where I am. And so it was a case of again practicing what you preach, and using good common sense to get through adversity. I have a book that's called "Get the Mud Out of the Water," and that book, I probably the most fun book I've ever done because it was a challenge for me to do. I can't do a lot of things I used to do. Having the MS, I can't drive anymore, and that's fine. I can't read and write anymore, and that's fine, because I'd always written my own books, and so I hired a court reporter to do that. I found out a couple things. One, you can do things if you just think about the common sense way of getting things done. I'm sitting looking at the courthouse one day on the city square, and I thought, why not hire a court reporter? That's all they do. And I had a court reporter friend of mine come over 3 days a week for a couple hours, and I'd talk with him, and he did a great job writing the book. At least they told me that the content's great. I don't have a clue what's in it, but they said it's good. It's called Common Sense Leadership. But getting back to the other book, I wanted to try to determine the common threads that run across people who are very successful, whether athletes or non-athletes, and the common thread that separates them from the lower group, the survivors. What separates the winners from the survivors? And I found something very interesting. There's very seldom difference in talent. It's a lot of it's based on opportunity. A lot of it falls in your lap. A lot of it's created, but there are certain common threads that run across the people who are successful consistently. One of those things is that people who are very, very good at what they do recover much quicker from adversity than the other people. Put it in a sport context. If I can take a pitcher and teach that pitcher mentally how to recover between pitches as opposed to between innings, you're talking a matter of 15 seconds or 10 seconds versus 15, 20 minutes. and in some cases it's a week because they only start every 5 days. And if I could get that done, then the pitcher should be able to perform better. And I had a pitcher years ago with one of the teams I worked with, and he had a 2-11 record at the All-Star break, and the manager called me and wanted to know if I could do something for him, and it appeared to me that he was obviously very talented, very emotional, really just would kill to win, and I thought the only difference is he gets frustrated at the wrong times. And so we started working on recovering between pitches as opposed to between innings. And as everything turned out, hopefully the program helped a little bit, but as everything turned out, he went from being 2-11 to the second half being 12-2. The program began to explode then, and began to get other calls. I did the same thing with a hitter with the New York Yankees, who was very, very hard on himself when he wasn't successful. And if his first at bat was bad, the whole night was bad. And we did the same thing, recovering between swings. And he retired as the only Yankee in history to hit over 300 for 6 straight years. And I smile when I say that because he's the best athlete I've worked with in 50 years. I've never been around a person who's such an incredible athlete, but probably even a better human being. We still keep in touch, and that's been many, many, many years ago. In fact, ended up working with one of his sons. And so it's not a hard process to learn to do, but it takes self-discipline to do it. So I had a book called Winning Sure Beats Losing, and the interesting thing about that book, I'm sitting on a plane one time and I'm looking through it, and a guy next to me, he looks at the cover and he said, "Boy, it must have taken a lot of research to come up with that conclusion, that winning sure beats losing." And it really bothered me a bit. And I said to him, "How many people do you have working for you?" And he said, "About 150. And I said, "How many of them think they're winning when they're just the best of the losers?" And we didn't talk much after that all the way to LA. But the point that I made was, too many people get complacent in their jobs or complacent in their lives and begin to tread water and never get past that plateau of behavior. And there's always something to learn every day. There's always something new and different every day. I learn something every day, and at my ripe old age of 76, I learn something every day. Now, it's in that book, we begin to get a lot of feedback from salespeople, especially, and they would tell the publisher, "I carry the book every day for chapter 8." And so I went back and looked in the book, and chapter 8 was all about how to recover quicker from adversity. And in baseball, if you're successful 3 out of 10 times, then you may be in the Hall of Fame. In sales, if you're successful 3 out of 10, you'd probably be fired. So it's all about life is all about quick recovery, and because I'm a firm believer that everybody needs adversity. Little adversity is good for the soul and makes you appreciate the good times better. Like, let me give you an example. If you're in sales and you get chewed up and spit out in the morning at 9 o'clock with a prospective client, how long is it before you're being you again? Is it 12 o'clock? Is it 1 o'clock? How many people have you made mad in the last 4 hours who had nothing to do with it? As opposed to leaving that office and being ready to go again in a positive direction at 9:05. Makes a world of difference. Not only makes a world of difference in your success, but it also makes a world of difference in how you feel about yourself. So I thought maybe I'll do a whole book about how to recover quicker from adversity. And the book's called Get the Mud Out of the Water. Now, if you're from the South, you probably understand what get the mud out of the water means. It means try to clear your mind. But I went to a marketing company when that book came out. I used it a lot because for 10 years I'd go to like 40 cities a year and talk to MS patient groups about their minds and their mental conditions and how they could recover and use their assets and this and that. And so they hired a marketing person, this company did, to take me to New York. We did 40 TV shows from 6 in the morning till 1 o'clock, and like 10 minutes. a new show. And we reached like 13 million people. And it was kind of fun. And we're just talking about how to recover and how to deal with your life and how to capitalize on your assets and not spend so much energy on your liabilities. I get back home, I get a call the next week from the Wall Street Journal. Well, they wanted to talk about the book. And but this reporter was not from the South, and I had to explain what get the mud out of the water meant. And we talked, and her question was very interesting. Is helping a salesperson get out of a slump the same process as helping a hitter get out of a slump? And I was fascinated by that. And we talked. Well, I forgot I did the interview. This is not too long after I was diagnosed with the MS, and my memory had gone someplace else. And so a month later, I'm speaking at Eli Lilly in Indianapolis. Before I get ready to speak, I get 5 phone calls. And they're all the same message. Do you work with individuals? I'd like to know more about your program. And I read about you this morning in the Wall Street Journal. Well, I'd never read one, so I ran down to the lobby and bought one so I could be educated about what I'd said before I called them back. And so, anyway, I began to think about that program, and I began to think about how many different people could use that book on how to recover quicker from adversity, and consequently, we've had gone through tons of those books, and they're still available. But I was so fascinated by it. I used the information out of that book to evaluate my apartment situation, my loft situation, and it worked. But it's what the book does is cause you to think. I've said before in these programs, I don't try to convince anybody to do anything. A lot of people look at me in the corporate world as a motivational speaker. I've never perceived myself that way because I've thought always that why try to motivate people? If people are not motivated to be there, they shouldn't be there. You should get rid of them. And instead motivate the environment, spend your money in a good place. But the more I thought about this situation and recovering from adversity, I thought it'd be something to talk about that would be interesting to people, no matter what you do. As some of the other things I've dealt with in sport, like visualization, those kind of things, can transfer those things over to real life and help yourself become better at what you do. And it takes a little effort every day. And anytime you start to try to develop yourself mentally, it's harder to sustain because you can't see the results readily. It takes a little longer. Physical talent, you make some adjustments, you see the results. When you're working on the mental side of your life, it may take a little longer. So you need to start with things on the mental side where you can see the results right away or feel the results right away. And if I'm working with someone who has a longer term situation, like low level of self-confidence and a person who has anxiety issues, a person who has problems with stress, that might take a little longer. I try to give them something to do the same day we meet, so that they can go out and use it that day and taste the results and taste success. Then they buy into the longer term kinds of things. And it's been an interesting process and a fun journey to take. But after I did that book, I began to spend more time just trying to understand really what I do every day. I think we can learn every day, as I said before, but what do I do? What I want to do is get people to think. I don't care if you change anything you're doing after you listen to me. That's not my deal. I just want you to think. I want you to think about your assets and your liabilities. I want you to think about the things that make you good and the things that drive you nuts. I want you to think about things. For example, when I look at myself, I had always written my books, as I said before, and I wrote the second textbook ever in sports psychology, which makes me very, very old. And I've always taken pride in writing my own books. Well, because of the MS, I can't do that anymore. So do I quit writing? No, I don't quit thinking. I put people around me who enable me to get the book done. Okay, I can't drive anymore. I hit 8 people. Well, not people. I didn't run up on the sidewalk, but I hit 8 cars in the back because I can see your brake lights, but because of the MS, I don't react very fast. So I bumped 8 people, some a little harder than others. But so I quit driving, and then shortly after I quit driving, I find that there are many ways where you don't have to drive. So you don't get down on yourself. You don't get frustrated. You just find another vehicle to get where you want to go. As I said before, I can't read. I can't read, and I can't write, but I'm happy as can be. When the one book came out, the most recent book called Common Sense Leadership, I got a call from the United Kingdom, and they said we want to do an interview, like a podcast interview, on your book, and I said, well, that'd be fun. So the interview's going fine, and all of a sudden, the interviewer says on page 95 in chapter 4, you made so-and-so comment, can you expand on that? And I said, man, I don't know how to tell you this, but I don't have a clue what's on 95, and I really don't know the title of chapter 4. And I think he thought I was being sarcastic, and in his strong English accent, he said, I'll beg your pardon. And I said, man, I don't know how to tell you this, but I can't read and write. Well, he hung up the phone. So the interview was relatively short, but the point was, I knew what was in the book. I just didn't know that specific thing. I could have talked to him or with him all day about the book if he hadn't got that specific. So there are all kinds of avenues you can use and processes you can use to enable yourself to get things done. And so don't ever get up in the morning and feel bad and conclude that you're gonna have a terrible day. You've got to get up every single day with an attitude that something's going to be done that day that's going to give you some pleasure. You're going to accomplish something. And my big deal is you're going to touch somebody's life every day. That if you do that and everything else goes wrong, you still had a good day because you've touched somebody's life. That's the reason we're here anyway. And so I wanted you to think about being able to do things that you don't think you can do. Think about, I had a MS patient in a group who laughed and during the process of the speech, because I've always thought people need to laugh every day, and afterwards came up and hugged me and started crying, not just whimpering, crying real loud. And I said, darling, if I offended you, I'm so sorry. She said, no, I've been clinically depressed from MS for the last 2 years, and tonight's the first night I've laughed in 2 years, and you showed me it's okay. Now, when you think about that, is that not why we're here? Is that not something to be proud of? When you have a woman come up to you in a wheelchair at a meeting, MS, and thank you for the speech, and you tell her, I'm glad you enjoyed it, and she says, you don't understand, I've been planning my suicide for 3 weeks. Tonight, you open my eyes and I'm going to be fine. If that doesn't touch your heart, I don't know that you should be watching these things anyway. It makes you proud to be able to exercise the gift that you've been given, to touch people's emotion and touch people's hearts. Now, the first thing I wanted to talk to you about tonight is, in order to be able to recover quickly, there's certain basic things you need to do. One, you need to identify your assets and your liabilities. In other words, you need to list your assets. Those are the things that make you who you are, the things you're happy with. And some people do it professionally and personally. Some people break it into 2 lists. Any way you want to do it. And then the other thing you want to list is your liabilities, the things that drive you nuts, the things that seem to slow you down when you're trying to get something done. And everybody has both. And I always tell people, I don't care if I'm going to look at your list, I don't care if there's 1 or 100. Okay? I just want you to be honest. And I don't want you to prioritize anything. I want you to jot them down as they come to your mind. Once you jot them down, then we'll do 2 things with them. One, we'll help you to build a program around your assets so that every day is a good day for you. And I've been doing what I do for 50 years. I've never had a bad day doing what I do. I don't know how many people can say that. Some days are challenges, but they're still good days. I know in some jobs and some things you do, if you're walking and breathing the end of the day, it's a pretty good day. So you can always find good things that happen during the day. And so you need to use your assets and build everything around your assets. And then other things will get better as you begin to exercise your assets within whatever you do. Now, I would say too that when you're looking at your assets, you can't hang your hat on results. Goals, for example, like I'm going to accomplish so-and-so by 5 o'clock. You never want to put yourself in a position where it gets to be 2 o'clock and you look and you're not going to be able to get to your goal, so you're going to have to lower it in order to feel good about the day. And psychologically, that's devastating. So why not set some little goals, 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2. Not long and driven things, but very, very specific things. We'll talk about how to compose those. But, if we concentrate on our assets and we know that we really waste 60% of our energy on things we can't control, it's because we forget what our assets are and we lose control of trying to eliminate our liabilities. Think about that for a little bit, because that's the major issue that we have in a lot of people, especially with athletes, is they'll get in a bind, and so they'll start trying to avoid their liabilities, and they forget what some of their assets are. And I think we mentioned in a program before that several people that I've dealt with laminate their assets on like a business card and carry it in their pocket all the time, so that if they have a bad experience or something happens, they can flip it out, and in 15, 20, 30 seconds, they can say to themselves, I just really had a bad thing happen, but I've still got these assets. You can't take them away from me. And we'll talk more later about how to evaluate liabilities, because many times we may list 10, 15, there'll be 2 or 3. If you really dig deeply, and the other 12, 13 are only symptoms. So you can pick out the one issue and you eliminate 6 or 7. So there are any number of things that once you start thinking about what you do and thinking about your assets and thinking about how you can get there using your assets, then the emphasis has to be on the process. In other words, don't go out and golf and say, I should shoot 70 on this course. No. It's one shot at a time. You hit a shot and you go, and then you hit another shot, and then you hit another shot. And you don't ever think about the next shot when you're walking past the first shot, because that's wasted energy. I asked some pro golfers, and 50% of the time your second shot's not going to be the shot you thought it was anyway. So you've just wasted walking 300 yards thinking about a shot you're not going to execute. So you take one shot at a time. You learn how to lock in, when to lock in, and when to let it go, and when to enjoy life. And so I don't know how many of you may be golfers, but most golf matches, amateur golf matches, are lost after the 15th hole, not because of bad shot execution, because mental errors, because they're mentally exhausted by 15 holes, as opposed to saving energy early on so that you have more energy later on. Just a little tidbit for you tuck away if you're a golfer. But getting back to the assets and liabilities, they are the basis for everything you do in your life, really. If you set down expectations, go back and review your assets and liabilities. Do they match? Are your expectations way out of line with what your assets are at this point? If so, we need renegotiate the expectations and grow as we go. Goals, that happens most of the time. Do you have the assets to execute the goals that you're looking at? And be realistic. Be realistic. It always bothers me that when athletes, for example, have a great game and they interview them afterwards, and how'd you get here? Well, I had a dream, and I wanted to be an NFL running back, and I wanted to be the best. And this message should be to all kids that if you can dream it, you can do it. That's absolutely a lie. That is terrible to perpetuate that thought in young people's minds. Different people are wired differently. We do certain things, we can't do certain things. I dream about, when I was pitching, I dream about throwing a 95-mile-an-hour fastball. But when I was throwing batting practice not too many years ago with one of my teams that I worked with, it was about 42 miles an hour. It was 95 when it passed me going the other way. So I quit throwing batting practice. There's a lot of things we'd like to do and dream about doing that our physical makeup will not permit us to do, or our mental capacity. And so don't ever, it always hated to hear motivational speakers take people's money in an auditorium, people who are searching for something, people who are grasping for something to hold on to. And the speaker says, you can do anything you want to do in life. That's so wrong. And that feeling lasts until you get back to real life, which may be an hour, 2 hours. But now you don't have any money for gas in a car, food for the kids. And so for temporary feel good, build your life around who you are so that you can execute the process using your assets, your personal assets. Don't compare yourself to other people. Just be you. I always hated a program called Psycho-Cybernetics where you could buy a videotape of Nolan Ryan throwing a fastball. Well, let me tell you, I was around Nolan Ryan when I worked with the Houston Astros. Let me tell you, nobody will ever have legs like Nolan Ryan in baseball again. So you can't, there's not going to be a Nolan Ryan. So don't try to always go out and emulate somebody who's made it at that level. Okay, there's a great tennis player, friend, many years, a great player, great teacher, Stan Smith, about 6'7", 6'8", probably weigh about 150 pounds, but a great player. You could buy a video of Stan Smith hitting an overhand serve, and then you try to go out and hit it. Well, if you're 5'8" or you're 6 feet tall, you can't hit a serve like a guy who's 6'8". So don't fall into using these gimmicks and these strange things. I see it more right now with coaches for young kids than any place else. I see these training tools that make absolutely no sense. I see these kids' minds being molded in a direction toward failure because this quote person has the best way to hitting. I guarantee you, if you go to 20 private hitting coaches, you'll find 20 best ways to hit. So you need to find somebody you trust. It's the same way in business. It's the same way in anything else. You've got to surround yourself with people you trust and people who appreciate your assets. Give you an example. If you have a sales group, you have 5 people in your sales group. If you had them all sit down and list their assets and liabilities, it's always fun to flaunt your assets, and a lot of people don't like to reveal their liabilities, but we all have them. So if you sit down around the table with your 5 people, and you've got 5 liabilities you lay on the table for this group, and if you're smart in hiring people, you will have people around that table who can offset some of your liabilities. If you don't hire people who are smarter than you in certain areas, then you're always just going to be okay. Okay, you're going to be a survivor. If you want to win, surround yourself with people who are better than you. Had a CEO one time hired a guy as director of operations in a restaurant company. The CEO was a marketing person. The guy was there for 6 months, turned operations around. It was incredible. The CEO fired him. And I said, why'd you fire him? He said, in 6 months, he never told me anything about operations. Think about that for a second. The operations guy never managed up. He never taught the CEO about operations. He was a hands-on guy, a controlling guy, didn't want to share information, so he was gone. So you've got to be able to surround yourself with good people and accept the help they can give you. So let's get back to sitting down with our 5 salespeople. Let's say you put your 5 liabilities on the table, and you go around the table, and of those 5 people, maybe each person has one asset that will offset one of your liabilities. Now you can get up and walk away with 10 assets, because if you're confronted and have to execute what you consider a liability, that person's a phone call away. And so it makes for not only a good team, but it makes for good chemistry. And so it's very, very interesting to me that that's a basis of my program I do sometimes when I talk about teamwork. I don't talk about team building, because if I'm called in to talk to a corporation and the people are sitting in the auditorium, then heck, the team's already built. So I'd rather be there to help the team work, to develop the chemistry, to make it so that everybody wants to work together, everybody supports each other. The team's already built. So don't do one of those team building things where you're going to the mountains and I fall over a cliff and a teammate throws me a rope and we're friends forever, at least till we get back to the office. Those team building exercises are fun, but if you want a lasting impact on your company, you can do those for fun, but don't do them to save your company. You do those kinds of things. Sometimes they reveal who people really are. If I'm speaking at a corporate convention and there's a golf tournament, I try to be in the foursome with the officers of the company. Why? Because you get somebody on a golf course, you find out who they are. And so there are different ways to find out, but don't have a meeting and talking about team building. Always have a meeting talking about teamwork. And if you have regional offices around the country, don't talk about every regional office being a part of the team. I did a meeting with IBM one time in Armonk, New York, and I had all the leaders from around the world in IBM and the countries that they basically control for IBM, and they had flags in front of them, and the new CEO they just brought in when we talk about teamwork, and I said, I can't do that, but think about this. Let's talk about when we talk about team building, I'm sorry. And I said, why don't we talk about league building and teamwork? For example, if you've got 10 regional offices and you're in New York, in Manhattan, and you've got an office in New Orleans and LA and San Francisco and Missouri, St. Louis and Chicago, Atlanta, Miami, it's very, very difficult to make those people feel like they're part of a team in Manhattan, New York, because it's a different personality where they are. So as opposed to talking about the teamwork or the team building, why don't we talk about league building? Manhattan, New York is the corporate office. It's where the commissioner of the league is. And every regional team has certain common rules they have to play by. That way you preserve the personality in those regional offices and you don't bleed those folks' personality away. For example, if you transfer from New York City to New Orleans, you're going to deal with people a whole lot differently than you do in New York. And it's that way in every part of the country. So you want to preserve that team, okay, that team's personality, and yet at the end of the year, how'd the league do? And those are just some thoughts I have about preserving people's identity and their assets and enabling them to perform every day using their assets without feeling like they need to be a part of something that they're not even close to. Now, next time we talk, I want to really dig into assets and liabilities and expectations. I think now that we're shut in, most of us, and we're having time to think, I think it's an opportunity to become very, very good at what we do. I always use an example of one of the executives of the team I worked with. One time he used my program to visualize and work hard on a mental game of tennis before he ever played. And he was a pretty good player when he started. You can learn a lot of things through mental practice and through visualization, and you can learn to appreciate your assets that way before you ever execute. And when you do execute, remember the emphasis is on the process. It's not on the end result, because if the process is correct, most of the time the end result will take care of itself. Remember, until the next time, you never learn to fly around trees till you fly into them. Little adversity is good for the soul.